hurt her. My mother told you to leave. So why are you still here? Why are you always still here?
Clara, I'm not here for you. I'm here for Taejun and for our baby.
Your baby! My father's on a ventilator because of you. My mother spent 6 hours cutting open his chest because of you. And you stand here acting like that baby makes you untouchable?
Oh, Clara, I'm not a child.
You're worse. You're the grown-up who waited.
The ICU door had not fully closed when Clara exploded. "Don't you dare say my name!" Her voice cut through the hospital corridor like shattered glass. Nurses froze mid-step. Heads turned from every direction. Sujin stopped halfway to the elevator, one hand still resting on the doorframe. Clara stood there in her crumpled school uniform, face flushed, eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. Crying was over. She was done crying. "You heard her?" Clara said, stepping forward on unsteady legs. "My mother told you to leave. So why are you still here? Why are you always still here?" Sujin recovered quickly. She straightened her coat and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with practiced calm. "Clara, I'm not here for you. I'm here for Taejun and for our baby." Clara's laugh was small, sharp, and ugly. It hurt coming out. "Your baby," she spat. "My father is on a ventilator because of you. My mother spent 6 hours cutting open his chest because of you. And you stand here acting like that baby makes you untouchable?" Sujin's jaw tightened. "Watch your mouth, Clara. I'm not a child." "No," Clara said, voice trembling but fierce. "You're worse. You're the grown-up who waited until my dad was dying to come back. You think being pregnant protects you? It doesn't protect you from me." The corridor went deathly quiet. Even the distant monitors seemed to pause. Sujin stepped closer, voice dropping into something colder. "You have no idea what you're doing. Push me, and I'll make sure your mother loses this hospital. I'll make sure your father wakes up to a scandal that destroys everything your family has." Clara didn't flinch. Her small hands curled into fists at her sides. "Try it," she whispered. "Call the press. Post your video. Tell everyone my father cheated. Tell them my mother chose the operating room over him. Go ahead." She took another step forward until they were nearly nose to nose. "But if you come near my mother again, if you say one more word to her, if you even breathe in her direction, I will never stop fighting you, Sujin. Never." For 3 long seconds, Sujin held her gaze. Then she turned on her heel. The sharp click of her shoes faded down the hallway. Clara stood shaking, fists still tight, breath coming in short bursts. Behind her, the ICU door opened softly. Flora stepped out. She had heard everything. She said nothing. She simply walked to her daughter, placed a steady hand on her small shoulder, and squeezed once, firm, warm, present. Clara didn't look up, but she leaned into the touch. If you are new here, subscribe and hit the bell because this story's just getting started. You do not want to miss what happens next. Earlier that same morning, Clara had woken to the wrong kind of silence. The Kang house felt heavier than usual. Her mother's side of the bed was cold, the pillow untouched. On the nightstand lay a folded note in Flora's neat handwriting. "I'm at the apartment. We'll talk later. Love you." Clara stared at it for a long time, then folded it exactly as she had found it. Her phone buzzed. Yoonji. "Assignment due today." "You dead or what?" She was alive. Barely. She pulled her laptop onto her knees and opened the blank document. Math didn't care that her father had shattered their family. It didn't care that her mother had left the house at midnight. It didn't care that the woman carrying her father's child was probably awake somewhere, planning her next move. She finished the math assignment with numb fingers and hit submit at 6:12 in the morning. Normal life, pretending the world wasn't cracking apart. Outside, Seoul rain fell in quiet, steady lines. She stood in the shower until the water ran cold, letting it hide the tears she couldn't explain. Downstairs, her father was already waiting in a perfect suit, coffee untouched. His face was gray, his eyes were red. "Clara," she walked straight past him to the front door. "I hope you don't come to my school for a while," she said quietly, without turning around. "I know I failed you." Taejun's voice was rough. "I'm sorry." "Save it," she whispered. "For later." Mr. O waited outside with an umbrella. She stepped into the rain. Seoul International High School. 10:47 in the morning. Third period calculus. The classroom was quiet except for the scratch of chalk. Rain streaked the windows. Clara wasn't writing. Her chest felt tight, like an invisible hand pressed against her ribs. Her phone buzzed in her bag. She almost ignored it. But when she saw Mr. O, family driver, her blood went cold. "Excuse me," she whispered, slipping out. In the empty hallway, she leaned against a locker and answered with shaking hands. "Miss Clara," Mr. O said, voice low and urgent. "Chairman Kang collapsed at Kang Tower. They've taken him to Lumen Medical Group." The phone nearly fell. Clara slid down the locker to the floor, hand pressed to her chest. "Dad?" Yunji found her there moments later. "My dad's dying," Clara choked out. The sob that followed was small and terrible. Then she was running, out of the school, into the rain, into a taxi, heart hammering the whole way to Lumen. When she burst through the ER doors, soaked and wild-eyed, the first person she saw was Sujin, standing by the nurse's station. And everything inside her turned to fire. Clara stormed forward before security could close the distance. "You did this," she said, voice low and trembling with a 14-year-old's fury. "From the late nights at the office to the phone calls at 2 in the morning, you broke us. And now you're standing in my mother's hospital like you have any right to be here?" Sujin's eyes widened, but she kept her voice soft, almost pitying. "Clara, I'm sorry about your father. I came as soon as I heard—" "Don't say sorry." Clara's small hands clenched into fists. "I don't care if you're carrying his child. Stay away from him. Stay away from my mother. Stay away from us." Security guards began moving in from the edges of the ER. Sujin's expression shifted, sharpening at the edges. "If he dies on that table," she said quietly, "ask your mother why she chose the operating room over her husband again today." Clara flinched as if struck. At that exact moment, the PA system crackled overhead, calm and clinical. "Dr. Kang to OR4. Patient Kang Tae-jun. Prep complete." Clara's head snapped toward the wide double doors at the end of the corridor. Her mother, her father, one operating table between them. The doors hissed open, then swallowed her mother whole. Inside her four, the air was cold and sharp with the smell of antiseptic and tension. Flora Kang moved through the scrub sink with mechanical precision, but her mind was a storm. 14 years. 14 years since she had last stood in an operating room with this level of stakes pressing against her ribs. She had laid down her scalpel once for love, for family, for the promise of a life built together. Today, she was picking it up again for the daughter who deserved better than the wreckage her father had left behind. She pulled on fresh gloves. The latex snapped against her wrists. Min-jae stood beside her, already scrubbed, his presence steady as it had always been. "Massive myocardial infarction," he reported quietly. "Stress-induced." He coded twice in the ambulance. ROSC on the third attempt. His vessels are scarred, years of 80-hour weeks, bad decisions, and a heart that has carried too much for too long. Flora said nothing. She stepped into the OR, cap and mask in place, eyes already reading the monitors above the table. Kang Tae-jun lay flat under the bright lights, skin gray, chest rising only because machines forced air into his lungs, tubes and lines snaking across his body. BP dangerously low, heart rhythm erratic and desperate. For one brief second, Flora allowed herself to see him, not as Chairman Kang, not as the man who had shattered their family, but simply as a patient whose heart was failing. A 47-year-old man who had made choices that cost everyone around him everything. Then she pushed it all aside. "Prep for emergency, CABG," she said, voice calm and clear. "Let's give him back his heart." Min-jae glanced at her across the table. In that single look lived everything they had never quite said aloud across 20 years of knowing each other, from residency corridors in another country to this sterile room in Seoul. He stepped back. "Patience yours, Chief," Flora began. Her hands remembered everything. The first incision was clean, decisive. She opened the chest with the same quiet authority she had once brought to every surgery before she became Chairman Kang's wife. The field revealed itself, scarred, damaged, angry. Years of stress and regret had narrowed the coronary arteries into battlefields. She worked through them methodically, grafting new vessels where old ones had failed. "Clamp here," she ordered. Min-jae placed it instantly, anticipating her every move. "Suture 50. Now." They moved in sync, a silent rhythm honed years ago in another country, in another life. Sweat beaded on Flora's forehead, but her hands never faltered. Each suture was precise, each decision clean. The bypass was messy. Taejun's arteries told the story of long nights and boardroom battles, and a heart that had carried far more than it was ever designed to hold alone. She worked through all of it, not for him. For the girl in the observation room above with her forehead pressed to the glass and her knuckles white on the railing. "Bleeder," Min-jae said. She found it before the field could flood. "Pressure dropping again," the anesthesiologist called. "Then we go faster," Flora said. Min-jae watched her across the table with something that lived deeper than professional admiration. He had first assisted for the best cardiothoracic surgeons across 3 countries. He had stood across from brilliant people and technically precise people, and the very rare people who were both. He had known since their first week of residency at USC that Flora Kang was the third kind, the kind that arrived once in a generation and somehow ended up running someone else's life instead of an OR. He had not understood it then. He understood it less now. What he understood completely was what he was watching across this table. A woman doing the exact thing she had been put on this earth to do, with the specific hands that had been built for it, on a Tuesday morning in Seoul that had started like any other and had become the morning that made everything make sense. He watched her hands. He had always watched her hands. In the observation room above OR4, Clara pressed her forehead against the cool glass, knuckles bone white on the railing. Security had tried once to move her. They had given up when they saw her face. She watched her mother's hands move inside her father's open chest with a mixture of awe and heartbreak she had no name for. This was the mother she had almost forgotten existed beneath the composed, careful woman who had managed their household for 14 years. This was Dr. Kang Flora, brilliant, ferocious, completely in her element, the woman who had been told she had to choose and had chosen wrong and was now reclaiming everything she had laid down with the same hands that had laid it down. Clara felt it move through her, something enormous and unnameable. Love for the woman below her, rage at the man on the table, grief for the family they used to be before she understood the family had been half built from the beginning. These were the same hands that had braided her hair on school mornings, that had wiped her tears after nightmares, that had signed permission slips and stayed up late and held her through everything. Now those hands were inside the man who had broken them. She pressed harder against the glass. This is who you really are, she thought. Not the wife, not the hostess, not the woman who put herself in a box for 20 years. This. Sujin stood a few feet behind her, in the same room, quiet and watchful. Security had let her in after she said family member. She stood with her arms folded across the beginning of her pregnancy and her eyes on the table below. "Turn her around," Clara said fiercely, without looking back. "She doesn't get to watch this." Nobody moved. The surgery continued. Clara kept her eyes on her mother's hands for the full 40 minutes. Every precise motion felt like a promise she couldn't yet put into words. 40 minutes in, Flora stepped out for 2 minutes. Gloves off, mask down, sweat on her brow. The particular 2-minute stillness a surgeon takes between critical phases. Not rest, just recalibration. Sujin was in the surgical lounge blocking the door. "Don't kill him," she said. Flora met her gaze without flinching. "I don't kill patients, not even the ones who betrayed me." Sujin's voice was low. "He keeps asking for you, even under sedation. Your name." Flora reached for a towel and wiped her face. Then he should have thought of that before. "I'm pregnant, Flora." Sujin's voice dropped. With his child. You know that. Flora stepped closer. Not touching. Just close enough that the full weight of who she was and where she was standing pressed into the space between them. I pity you, she said quietly. You think a baby will make him stay. He couldn't stay for his daughter. He couldn't stay for 20 years of a woman who gave up everything to hold his life together. What makes you think he will stay for you? She walked past her without another word, back through the scrub room door, back to the table. Jiyeon handed her the instrument before she asked. Let's finish, Flora said. When the heart restarted, strong, steady sinus rhythm filling the monitors, the entire OR exhaled without cheering. Nobody cheered in rooms like this. Cheering was for people who didn't understand how close it had been. Min-jae looked at Flora across the table. In that single look lived everything. 14 years of watching a door that shouldn't have closed stay closed. 2 years of a door left deliberately open. 6 hours of standing across this table, watching hands he had never once stopped believing in do exactly what they had always been built to do. Flora held his gaze for one moment, then she turned away. Close him up, she told the resident. She stripped off her gloves and walked out of the OR with her shoulders straight and her heart still racing and the gold heart pendant warm at her collarbone. 6 hours later, the ICU was quiet except for the steady rhythm of machines keeping watch. Kang Tae-jun's eyes fluttered open for the first time. The lights were too bright. Everything hurt. His chest felt raw, split open and stitched back together by hands he still recognized even through the heavy sedation and the specific fog of a body that had been to the edge of itself and been pulled back. Clara was curled in the chair beside him, small and exhausted in her crumpled school uniform, knees pulled to her chest. Sujin stood near the door, quiet and watchful. Flora stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, face composed into the particular blankness of a woman who has decided exactly how much she will let show. Tae-jun's cracked lips moved. The word came out hoarse, barely above the monitors. But the ICU room was very quiet. Flora... Clara's eyes flew open. Sujin's face crumpled. Flora's jaw tightened, but she did not move. The name hung in the air like smoke. Then Tae-jun's eyes closed again and he slipped back under, chest rising and falling with the help of the machines. The room felt smaller, heavier. Clara sat up slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. She looked from her father's pale face to her mother at the foot of the bed, and then to Sujin by the door. Everything she needed to understand about this room, she read in those 3 faces in the time it took the monitor to complete one full beep cycle. She whispered the name before she could stop herself. Flora. As if testing the shape of what it meant that her father had said it first. Flora finally lowered her arms. She walked around the bed and knelt in front of her daughter so they were exactly eye level, cupping Clara's small, tear-streaked face in both hands. Her hands were still cool from the OR. I heard him, Flora said softly. And I heard you in that school hallway hours ago. I heard everything today, Clara, and I still choose you. Nothing he says from that bed changes that. She stood. Her voice turned precise. Leave this room, Ms. Sujin. This is my patient, my daughter, and my hospital. Security escorted Sujin out. The door clicked shut. Flora exhaled once. Then she knelt again, eye level with her daughter. Your father made choices that broke us. I won't pretend they didn't, but he loves you more than he ever knew how to show. Hate and love aren't opposites when it comes to family, Clara. They live in the same place. Clara nodded, throat tight. Exhaustion crashed over her. She curled back into the chair, pulling Flora's jacket over herself like a blanket. She did not fully sleep. She drifted in the gray space between exhaustion and consciousness, still curled in the chair, when voices drifted through the slightly open ICU door. Sujin's voice, low, urgent. He's stable. Flora operated herself. Yes. Park, listen. If he lives, we still have the recordings. We can still pressure the board. Security footsteps approached. The voice cut off abruptly. Clara's eyes snapped open, heart hammering. She grabbed Flora's wrist. I heard her. Through the door. She was talking to someone named Park. She said they still have recordings. She said they can still pressure the board. Flora went completely still. I believe you, she said. No hesitation. She stood and stepped into the hallway where Min-jae was already waiting. Pull the parking lot. Footage, Flora told him quietly. Staff entrance, midnight until now, and run the name Park. She moved down the corridor with the specific, unhurried certainty of a woman who has already decided what she is going to do and is simply executing it. They gathered in a small private consultation room 1 floor below. Clara sat between her mother and Min-jae, still wrapped in Flora's jacket. Min-jae opened the laptop. At 2:17 in the morning, the timestamp was unmistakable. Sujin exited the staff entrance with steady steps. No tears, no panic. She checked her phone once and slipped it away. A black sedan pulled up. Park Ji-hoon stepped out. Sharp jaw, expensive watch, tailored coat. He opened her door with the easy intimacy of someone who had done it many times before. He kissed her forehead. The car drove off into the rainy Seoul night. Clara's hands curled in her lap. That's him. That's exactly who I heard her talking to. Min-jae's voice was low. Park Ji-hoon, CEO of Ji-hoon Capital. He's been inside Kang Tower twice this month under a different name. Flora leaned forward. Run the plate. Pull Tae-jun's phone logs and meeting records for the last 60 days. Mr. O arrived shortly after, face grim. He handed Flora a printed transcript. Chairman Kang's phone was powered off for nearly 2 hours before the collapse, he said. Only one message came through at 8:03 in the morning, from Sujin. Flora read it. If you don't meet me now, I'll send everything to the board and to Flora, including the recording of you telling me to lie to the auditors. Min-jae played the intercepted call Sujin had made moments after the ambulance left Kang Tower. Park's voice, calm and calculating. Is it done? Sujin. He's in surgery. Flora's operating on him herself. Park. Good. If he dies, we get the company. If he lives, he'll be weak and grateful. Either way, we win. The recording ended. The silence in the room was absolute. Clara's hands were shaking in her lap. She wanted this to happen. She pushed him until his heart broke, and then she stood there, watching my mother save him. Flora closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, the chief of surgery was fully present. The talk screen was clean. The collapse was real. Pure stress. But she provoked it deliberately, systematically. She turned to Clara. Voice gentle but immovable. We do this together. You do not go near her alone. You tell me everything. Understood? Clara nodded. Then quietly. What if Dad was part of it? Flora's jaw tightened. Then we face that truth too. But I'm not letting you lose him before we know what's real. Later that night, when Tae-jun was fully awake and lucid, Flora brought Clara back into the room. He looked smaller in the hospital bed. Pale, hooked to machines. But his eyes were clear when they found his daughter and then the woman who had saved his life. His face crumpled before he could stop it. Clara, Flora. He struggled to sit up slightly, wincing. Tears gathered without shame. I heard some of what happened. The messages, the recordings. His voice was rough and stripped of everything. I was a fool, a coward. I let Sujin get close because I was lonely and weak and terrified of losing everything I had built. I thought I could contain it before it touched you both. He looked at Flora. Raw remorse carved into every line of his face. You stood in that OR and put your hands inside my chest after I destroyed our marriage. After I failed our daughter for years. You saved the man who least deserved saving. I don't know how to carry that. I don't know how to ever repay it. Clara's lips trembled. She didn't move closer, but she didn't leave. And Clara, his voice broke completely. I was supposed to protect you. Instead, I made you grow up too fast. I chose the company over being your father. I let you down in ways you shouldn't have to forgive. I'm so sorry, baby, for every missed dinner, For every time you waited and I didn't come. For making you feel like you had to choose sides. He turned back to Flora. I don't expect forgiveness today. I only ask, please let me try to become the man you both deserved, even if it takes everything I have left. The monitors beeped in the heavy silence. Flora stood still for a long moment. Then she spoke, voice quiet but firm. Rest, Taejun. We'll talk when you're stronger and when Clara is ready. Right now, we have bigger battles to fight. She guided Clara toward the door with one arm around her daughter's shoulders. As they stepped into the hallway, Flora looked back once, not with love, not with hate, but with the clear-eyed weight of a woman who had made her decision and was done revising it. In the corridor, Min-jae was waiting. The board, he said. We have everything we need. We move at dawn. Flora nodded. The gold heart pendant caught the harsh hospital light. Then let's end this. She turned to Mr. O. Take Clara home. She needs to shower and change. Bring her back within the hour. Clara looked up sharply. I'm not leaving. You are, Flora said, not unkindly, but with the specific finality of a woman who had spent the day making decisions that could not be argued with. You cannot fight for this family in a soaked uniform, Clara. 1 hour. Then you come back. Clara held her mother's gaze for a long moment. Then she stood, picked up her bag, and followed Mr. O without another word. She was back in 50 minutes. Fresh jeans, oversized sweater, hair still slightly damp from the shower. She walked straight back to the hospital floor without stopping, sat down in the corridor outside her father's room, and waited. She had not eaten. Nobody had noticed until Min-jae appeared with vending machine ramyun and set it down beside her without comment. It was terrible. She ate every noodle. Dawn at Kang Group headquarters arrived cold and gray and entirely without mercy. The boardroom on the 42nd floor sat above Seoul like a courtroom built for people who believed altitude was the same as authority. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced east. The city still half dark below. The Han River, a long silver scratch through the middle of everything. 7 board members sat in their leather chairs, with their coffee untouched and their expressions arranged into the careful neutrality of men who had not yet decided which side of history they intended to stand on. Flora walked in at 5:48 in the morning, no makeup, dark teal scrubs under a pressed white coat borrowed from the surgical lounge, gold heart pendant at her collarbone. She had operated for 6 hours, investigated through the night, and had not slept. She carried one folder. Min-jae walked in behind her. Mr. O behind him. Nobody sat down. Flora placed the folder on the table and opened it without ceremony. At 8:03 in the morning yesterday, she said, voice clean and level as a surgical incision. Kang Tae-jun received a blackmail threat from his former assistant. The threat referenced fabricated financial records and a private recording made without consent. He went to Kang Tower to contain it. The stress of that confrontation triggered a massive myocardial infarction. She laid the printed transcript on the table. The board members leaned forward without meaning to. This is Park Ji-hoon. The parking lot photograph went down beside it. CEO of Ji-hoon Capital. He has been inside this building twice in the last month under a false name. He is also the boyfriend of the woman who sent that blackmail message. She opened the laptop, pressed play. Park's voice filled the boardroom. Clean and clinical and damning. If he dies, we get the company. If he lives, he owes us. Either way, we win. The silence that followed had weight. Board member Choi, the eldest, set down his cup very slowly. How reliable is this recording? Hospital security. Time-stamped. Unedited. Flora looked at each of them in turn. They used fabricated evidence to destabilize Kang Group and acquire controlling shares through the chaos that followed. Chairman Kang was the target. My daughter was the contingency. That landed. She knew it would. Board member Kim cleared his throat. The chairman's medical status Stable, Flora said. Full recovery expected. 3 months minimum leave, during which time this board needs to decide publicly how it responds to a coordinated attack against its leadership. She closed the folder. Criminal complaints against Park Ji-hoon and Sujin Lee have already been filed. Evidence is with the prosecutor's office. I've done my part. She picked up her bag and walked out before anyone found the language to respond. In the corridor, Min-jae caught up in 3 strides. That's it? He said. That's it, Flora said. They'll do the right thing. They always do when the alternative is public humiliation. She was right. The board's formal statement went out at 7:02 in the morning. Criminal complaints filed. Chairman taking full medical leave. Complete cooperation with authorities. By 7:15, the story was everywhere. By 7:30, Sujin's name was trending in Seoul. She found Sujin in the hospital lobby. Flora had not expected her to still be there, but there she was, alone on one of the long benches near the entrance, coat still on, bag in her lap, phone face down beside her. Not composing messages, not making calls, just sitting. Like a woman who had run a very long race and arrived at the finish line to find nothing waiting there. The lobby moved around her, morning shift nurses crossing in both directions, families arriving for visiting hours, a child pulling ahead of its mother toward the elevator. Sujin sat through all of it without seeing any of it. Flora stopped in front of her. Sujin looked up. For the first time since this entire thing began, she did not reach for composure. Her eyes were red, not from crying, from carrying something heavier than she had planned for when she started carrying it. It's over, Flora said quietly. Not a threat, a fact. Sujin nodded once. Small. Strange. I know. Flora studied her for a moment. The woman who had walked through her mansion wearing her nightgown, the woman whose pregnancy had broken her daughter on a sofa at midnight, the woman whose plan had nearly ended in a man's death on a boardroom floor. Why? Flora asked. Not angry, genuinely asking. The same directness she brought to a diagnosis she did not yet understand. Sujin looked at her hands for a long time. I thought if he needed me enough, he would choose me properly. Not secretly, not occasionally. She paused. I thought if the company was threatened and everything fell apart, I would be the last thing standing. And Park Ji-hoon? Sujin's jaw tightened. He saw an opportunity. I thought I was using him. He was using me more efficiently. She looked up. Her eyes were honest in a way they had never been in any other room. I never wanted Taejun to collapse. I want you to know that. Flora was quiet for a moment. I know, she said. The talk screen was clean. The collapse was pure stress. You pushed too hard for too long, and his heart broke under it. Sujin closed her eyes briefly. The baby, Flora said. Get a paternity test, privately, before it becomes a legal issue. Sujin looked at her sharply. Not for my sake, Flora said. For yours. You deserve to know the truth before you make decisions that shape the rest of your life. She walked away without waiting for a response. She did not look back. She had stopped doing that. Behind her, Sujin sat alone in the Lumen lobby, while Seoul moved through its morning outside the glass doors, relentless, indifferent, entirely prepared to continue without her. Clara was eating vending machine ramyun when her father was moved to a private room. 3 nurses had suggested real food. She had ignored all of them. The ramyun was terrible. She ate every noodle. When the door to Taejun's new room opened, she stood slowly, threw the empty cup away, and straightened her sweater out of habit. She walked in. Taejun was sitting up on his own, ventilator gone, oxygen tube at his nose, IV still in his left arm. He looked 10 years older than the man who had stood at the dining table yesterday morning with untouched coffee and red eyes and nothing useful to say. Clara sat in the chair beside the bed. Neither of them spoke. The machines beeped steadily. Outside the room's small window, Seoul had turned sharp and clear. The specific brightness that only comes after heavy rain when the sky has nothing left to hold back. How's the food? Taejun asked finally. Clara glanced at him. Terrible. Hospital food is always terrible. I wasn't eating hospital food. He almost smiled. Then it faded. Clara, I'm not ready to forgive you, she said. Flat, honest. No cruelty in it, just truth. I need you to understand that. I'm not going to tell you it's okay because you said sorry. It's not okay. It might not be okay for a long time. Taejun nodded. His eyes were wet, but he didn't let them spill. I know. But, Clara said. She looked at her hands, then back at him. I was terrified when Mr. O called. More terrified than I have ever been. And I came here running. I didn't grab my bag. I didn't stop for my teacher. I ran. Her voice wobbled on the last word. She steadied it. I don't know what that means yet. I'm 14. I'm not supposed to have to know. But I came here running. And I think that counts for something even if I can't explain what. Taejun looked at his daughter. This girl, who had submitted a math assignment at 6:12 in the morning so that normal life could keep its shape, who had faced Sujin in 2 separate hospital corridors, who had pressed her forehead to the observation room glass and watched for 2 hours without looking away. It counts for everything, he said. They sat in the clear, bright morning, not close enough to touch, but together. After a while, Taejun said quietly, Your mother, she is extraordinary. Clara looked at the window. I know. I never deserved her. No, Clara said, simply, without cruelty. You didn't. Taejun exhaled, a long, jagged sound that carried 20 years in it. Are you going to be okay? Clara asked, still watching the window. I'm going to try, he said. That's all I can promise. I'm going to try every day. Clara nodded once. She stood, walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame, back still turned. Come to my school, she said quietly, when you're better. Not for a crisis, just a normal day. Come pick me up one afternoon like nothing happened, like we're just trying. She walked out before he could answer. But she left the door open behind her. The divorce papers arrived at 2:17 in the afternoon. Park from Park and Lee, small, sharp-suited, efficient in the specific way of someone accustomed to the worst days of other people's lives, delivered them personally to Taejun's room. 2 copies, 1 pen. Flora had not planned to be there. She came anyway. Not for him, because it was the right room to close it in. Taejun signed first. His hand was steadier than she expected. The pen moved across the signature line, and the sound it made was small and definitive. The sound of any important thing ending. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a pen and a line and 20 years becoming something that lived in the past tense. Flora signed beside him. Her signature was clean and precise. The same hand that had operated for 6 hours that morning. The same hand that had bought a gold heart pendant in Los Angeles before she ever knew his name. Park collected both copies and nodded to each of them and left without ceremony. The door closed. Clara sat in the corner chair and said nothing. She had come back. She had not been asked to. She had come because she was their daughter, and she understood at 14 that some things needed to be witnessed by someone who loved both people, even when love was complicated and incomplete, and did not fix anything at all. Flora stood at the window with her back to the room. The sole afternoon stretched beyond the glass, bright, cold, entirely indifferent to the document that had just been signed inside this room. She had been married for 20 years. Now she was not. It felt less like a door closing and more like a window opening. The specific sharp intake of outside air after a very long time in the same room. She turned from the window. Taejun was looking at her. His face was open in a way she had rarely seen it across 20 years. No performance, no management. Just the face of a man who understood in full what he had given away and was carrying that understanding without anywhere to put it. Thank you, he said, for the surgery, for today, for everything she had been that he had never properly named while he still had the chance. Flora looked at him one final time. The way you look at something you have decided to release, not with anger, not with love, but with the clear-eyed honesty of someone who has counted the cost and found they can carry it. "Take care of yourself," she said. "Your daughter needs you alive." She picked up her bag. Clara touched her father's hand briefly as she passed the bed. The lightest contact, barely a second, but deliberate. He felt it. He closed his eyes. They walked out together. The door closed behind them both. Flora did not go straight home. She stood in the corridor outside the room with Clara beside her, and for a moment they were just two people at the end of a very long day, standing in the ordinary afternoon of a hospital corridor with the sound of the building going on around them. Min-jae appeared at the far end of the hall. He walked toward them unhurried, fresh scrubs, dark eyes steady, a takeaway coffee cup in each hand. He looked at Clara first, then at Flora, reading both faces with the quiet efficiency of a man who had known them separately for a long time and was only recently beginning to understand what they looked like together. "She ate vending machine ramyun for lunch," Min-jae said to Flora, tilting his head toward Clara. "It was fine ramyun," Clara said. "It was terrible ramyun," Min-jae said. Flora looked between them. Something loosened in her chest, the last tight thread of the longest day finally releasing. "Go home," Flora said to Clara. "Mr. O is downstairs. Eat real food. Sleep. In that order." Clara looked at Min-jae with the particular measuring gaze of a girl who had spent 2 days standing in corridors deciding who was worth trusting. She had her mother's eyes when she looked at people that way. The same focused honesty. The same refusal to pretend she wasn't seeing what she was seeing. "Take care of her," Clara said to him. Not a request, a statement. The kind that came from someone who had already decided the answer. Min-jae met her gaze without flinching. "I will." Clara picked up her bag, walked down the corridor. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in without looking back. They closed. Flora and Min-jae stood alone in the corridor. The hospital moved around them, carts rolling, a doctor's name called over the PA, the sound of a family somewhere down the hall receiving news. And in the middle of all of it, they stood in the particular quiet of two people who had been moving toward this moment for a very long time and had finally arrived. Min-jae held out one of the coffee cups. Flora took it. Their fingers did not quite touch. That not quite was somehow louder than contact would have been. Flora looked at the cup, then at him. "I signed the papers today," she said. "I know," he said. "Mr. O told me." "I thought I would feel more," she said. "But mostly I feel like I can breathe properly for the first time in a very long time." Min-jae looked at her, steady. "That's enough," he said. "You don't have to feel more than that tonight." Flora turned the cup in her hands the way she turned things when the rest of her was still working something out. "You said you left a door open," she said. 2 years ago, when you sent the offer. You said you left it because you didn't know how to ask me to walk through it without it looking like you were asking me to leave my life." "I remember every word," Min-jae said. "I walked through it for the surgery," Flora said. "And for Clara. And for myself." She paused. "But you were part of why I could. You being here, you waiting without asking anything, that was part of it." Min-jae was quiet. "I don't know what that means yet," Flora said. "I'm not ready to name it, but I'm not going to stand here and pretend I don't know it's true." Min-jae looked at her for a long moment. Then he said the truest, simplest thing he had. "I'm not going anywhere, Flora. I haven't gone anywhere in 20 years. I'm certainly not starting now." She looked at him. The man who had stepped back in every OR without being asked, who had left a door open and waited without pressure for 2 years, who had stood across a surgical table from her that morning with an expression that held everything he had never allowed himself to say out loud. She took one step toward him, just one, but it was deliberate, unhurried, chosen. And he saw it, and they both understood exactly what it meant without needing to say any of it. "Walk me to my car," she said. He did. The Mapo-gu apartment was warm when Clara arrived that evening. She came anyway, The particular homing instinct of a girl who knew where her mother actually lived, now regardless of whose name was on which door. Flora buzzed her in before she finished knocking. Already knew. 2 cups on the counter. Tea. Slightly too strong. The way Flora made it when she was tired, and not paying precise attention to steeping times. Clara sat on the kitchen floor without being asked. Flora sat beside her. They held their cups and looked at the kitchen window and the sole night beyond it, towers and lights, and the particular ordinary beauty of a neighborhood that had never been designed to impress anyone. Clara wrapped both hands around her cup. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked. Flora looked at the window. She let the question sit for a moment before she answered. Not because she didn't know, but because it deserved a real answer, and not a reflexive one. "Yes," she said, not because she had to, because she meant it completely. Clara nodded. Then she said the thing she had been holding since she stood in the observation room with her forehead against the glass, and watched her mother's hands move inside her father's chest. "You gave 14 years up for him," Clara said quietly. "The OR, the surgeries, being Dr. Kang instead of Mrs. Kang. You put it all down. And today you had to go back in and save him anyway." She looked at her mother, eyes wide and honest, and asking something that lived underneath the words. Was any of it worth it? Flora was quiet for a long time. Longer than Clara expected. Then she said, "I got you." Clara blinked. "I gave up 14 years, Flora said, "and I got you out of it. And I got to know exactly who I am. Because there is nothing like losing yourself completely to teach you who you were the whole time." She looked at her daughter. "So yes, it cost everything. And I would do every single part of it again to be sitting on this kitchen floor with you right now." Clara felt something in her throat that made speaking impossible for a moment. She leaned sideways until her head found her mother's shoulder. Flora's arm came around her. They sat on the kitchen floor of the Mapagu apartment with 2 strong tea and the sole night outside the window and the particular complicated piece of people who have been through something enormous together and have come out the other side still knowing each other completely. "What is Minjae to you?" Clara asked after a while. Into the sweater. Flora was quiet for 1 beat too long. "Clara," she said, "I'm asking. I know you're asking." "So?" Flora looked at the ceiling briefly. "Someone who has always known who I was, even when I forgot." Clara considered this seriously, the way she considered things that mattered. "That's a good thing to be," she said finally. "Yes," Flora agreed. "It is." They stayed on the floor until the tea went cold. Clara fell asleep against her mother's shoulder the way she had when she was very small, completely and without reservation and entirely unbothered by the kitchen floor. Flora covered her with the throw blanket from the sofa and stayed beside her in the quiet. Sol breathed on outside the window. When Clara was deeply asleep, Flora stood. She moved to the kitchen window, the same window where weeks ago she had stood with the sole night outside and felt the particular weight of a life that was finally starting to belong to her. This window was different from the mansion window, smaller. It showed her a narrow slice of Mapogu Street and the warm lights of the building opposite, and the ordinary honest beauty of a part of Seoul that had never been designed to make anyone feel small. She liked it more than any view she had ever paid for. She reached up and held the gold heart pendant between her fingers. She had bought it herself in Los Angeles. Before Seoul, before USC, and the residency and the exam she and Minjae had both failed. Before the corridor where she had made a call that no one else in the room would have made and had been completely right. Before Taejun and the mansion and the 20 years and the particular invisible art of disappearing inside someone else's life while telling yourself you had chosen it. She had bought it because she liked it, because it was simple and gold and shaped like something she intended to keep. She had worn it through all of it, through the marriage and the mansion and the galas and the years of silence, through the night she left and the morning she arrived at Lumen and the surgery and the papers and one deliberate step toward a man who had never once looked away. The pendant was warm from her skin. It was always warm from her skin. She let it go. She stood at the window of her apartment in Mapogu, her apartment, her window, her city from this particular angle. And she did not feel the weight of anything she had put down. She felt the lightness of someone who has been carrying something for a very long time and has finally set it down in the right place at the right moment without ceremony or audience. She was Dr. Flora Kang, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Lumen Medical Group, the woman who had repaired a heart in 6 hours and signed papers in the afternoon and come home to kitchen floor tea and a daughter asleep on her shoulder. She was not waiting for permission. She was not managing anyone's comfort. She was not performing the version of herself that was most convenient for the people around her. She turned off the kitchen light. She went to bed. She slept deeply and without interruption for the first time in a very long time. And in the morning, when the Mapogu street began its ordinary day outside her window, when the city exhaled and the light came in and the Han River carried everything it always carried without keeping any of it, Dr. Flora Kang would wake up and put the gold heart pendant at her collarbone and walk out into the life she had chosen. Not the one she had been given. Not the one she had performed. The one she had built. One room at a time. Or from the inside out. It was already hers. It had always been hers. She just finally knew it. If Flora's story moved you, drop a comment below and tell us which moment hit you the hardest. This was episode 3, the finale, the end of the Kang family story as we knew it, and the beginning of everything else. If you are just finding us now, go back and watch from episode 1. You will not regret a single minute. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Share this with someone who needs Flora's story today. We will see you in the next one.